To start off today, maybe one of the more important things that I was going to mention today, I just wanted to say Happy National Cookie Day. It is National Cookie Day. For those who don't know, I love cookies. I absolutely love them. They're one of my favorite things. In fact, when Tom and I got married at our wedding, I didn't care if we had a cake at the wedding. I just wanted cookies at the wedding. So we had our caterer make fresh, hot, baked cookies like coming right out of the oven there at the wedding, and it was awesome. I loved it so much. It was awesome. And I know we talk about love a lot here at FBC, usually not love of cookies necessarily, but God's love, how he loves us just the way we are, talk about loving one another, talk about what love is and isn't, and some of the dynamics that surround our experience of love. And I thought I was going to get longer through it before I started this, but for us, for Tom and I, our wedding, surrounding the wedding, there was some challenging, I guess, moments you can call them, where some of the members of our immediate family, wouldn't come to the wedding. They believed, God wasn't okay with gay marriage and wouldn't show up. And some of them, I think, even for them, it was almost an act of love for them. They saw that as an act of love. And that was hard, right? That love did not bring a sense of comfort, a sense of peace. It was challenging. But I'll tell you, on that day of our wedding, we had a group of people there, friends, family who did show up, who were it was amazing. It was just full of love. I mean, to the point where you could kind of reach out and grab it. It felt so tangible. It was just so real. They were there loving, supporting us, supporting the love that we had for us and celebrating with us that day. And it was just such a beautiful thing. And so despite kind of the craziness of everything that was going on surrounding the wedding, that moment, oh my gosh, if I could just describe, I can't put it in words, where it was just a sense of peace that kind of took over, and this joy, just being surrounded by the love that we had with everyone there. And it was just such an amazing thing knowing that love dominated in that place. And I actually wonder if Jesus had a sense of that kind of love during the Last Supper. And I know the Last Supper is usually this is not the time of the year we usually talk about that, right? It's usually around Easter time. Focusing on Jesus' love, the sacrifice he's about to make. He's preparing his disciples for what's to come. But I want to kind of look at that passage maybe from a little bit of a different angle today and kind of talk about it from a different perspective. So go with me here, please. Let's imagine the scene, okay? Jesus has spent 3+ years with his disciples and the community of people that he's been gathering around with him. And they've been getting to know each other. They've been building a relationship. They're creating this deep bond between all of them. And they're coming up to this Passover meal. So essentially, it's a holiday season, if you want to look at it from that perspective. Jesus knows his death is approaching, and he wants to spend this holiday season essentially with his disciples and the people that he's had this relationship with and kind of built with it. Essentially, I kind of think of it, maybe he was spending it with his family of choice, people that he wanted around him. For those who were here a couple of weeks ago, we had our Friendsgiving, and I kind of imagine it in that similar way. So imagine Jesus kind of telling the disciples, hey, disciples, go down to Fellowship Hall, set up the chairs and the tables, and go get John Ferrante to make way too much good food. And just we're going to get together, and we're just going to have this good time together and just kind of all connect. And so that's what they do. They get together. They're there. And then Jesus makes this statement. He says, I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. Now, normally we kind of focus on the before I suffer part, right? We kind of look at it from that perspective. But I actually want to look at it from the beginning of the statement that Jesus made. He says, I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you. Eagerly desired. In other words, Jesus was saying, I couldn't wait to have this holiday time with you. I couldn't wait to have this holiday meal with you. I was looking forward to this time together. Again, keeping in perspective, Jesus is probably feeling all kinds of stuff at this point, right? He's going through all kinds of stress. He knows his death is coming. He's experiencing all kinds of stuff. In fact, later in this chapter, it's when Jesus goes to the Garden of Gethsemane, and they say he's in agony, and to the point where angels are coming down to strengthen him. So we know Jesus has a lot going on, and there's a lot happening, and he's feeling all of these emotions. But yet he still says, I eagerly desire to be with you guys. I wanted to be with you. Perhaps kind of similar to our wedding experience, maybe that time for Jesus, despite all the craziness was going on, brought Jesus a sense of peace knowing that he was with the people that he loved. So, what led Jesus to eagerly desiring this time together? And I think there's a couple things that, kind of looking back at his life, that we could point out. One is Jesus loved without condition. So he obviously spent a lot of time together with the disciples, right? They built relationship together. They hung out together. He was very intentional about creating space for love to happen. And it might have been even in simple ways. I can imagine them sitting around a campfire, sharing life stories, or what it was like growing up for them, or maybe, traveling from one city to the next, or telling each other jokes and having a good laugh. Whatever. They just did the everyday life together, and they built this relationship intentionally together. Loving without conditions, he didn't expect perfection. He didn't expect perfection. If we look at the life of some of the instances in the Bible with the disciples, they really sometimes said and did stupid stuff, right? So, and yet Jesus still, they were welcomed at the table. He wanted them at the table. They were still a part of his community, and not just his outskirt community. They were part of his intimate community that he had, and they were still welcomed. But we can go even deeper than that, because at the Last Supper, we know Judas, who was about to betray him, and Peter, who was about to deny him. They were at the table. And Jesus didn't say in that statement that he made, I eagerly desired some of you. He said, I eagerly desired you, including those that were there. We've talked a lot about opening our circle wide, and I know that's hard for me. That's a challenge for sure. But yet, Jesus was opening his circle wide, even to those who may have been a little bit more risky. However, I think it's also important to note that if we want to look at the life of Jesus, we got to look at the full life. And there were times that Jesus made sure to set up healthy boundaries and self-care. So loving without condition doesn't mean that you don't have boundaries and you consider the sense of self-care. For instance, in the first chapter of Mark, Jesus went away to a quiet place to pray. He got away from the crowds, he got away from his disciples, he got away from everybody just to create space. He needed that space. He knew, he was self-aware enough to know that he needed to create that area where he was taking care of himself as well. And when the disciples came and said, hey, Jesus, come on, let's go over here. The crowd's waiting for you. He actually said, hey, no, let's go this way. I need to go this way. He knew his sense of purpose. He was aware of just what he needed and how he could also take care of himself there. But also in Luke, there was a time when Jesus was, traveling around the area of Galilee. And I guess in his thought, he thought of going to Judea, the next area over. And he says, you know what? There's people there that are actually trying to kill me. I'm not going to go in that direction. So again, I think we see that Jesus is taking the time to be aware, kind of consider the risk, because loving without condition does have risk. And he's considering the risk. He's considering, okay, what do I need to do? What's best? What's healthiest? What's most appropriate at that time and place? Now again, we come to this passage, the Last Supper. Jesus is at risk. He could have ran away, but he didn't. So we see in the life of Jesus, there's some sort of healthy balance of understanding when the risk is appropriate and when it's not. And in this case, Jesus was preparing himself for that risk, for what he was about to do, because again, we know loving without condition can have risk with it. Now, along with that, I think we see that Jesus embraced the love. Jesus embraced the love. But this is titled The Last Selfie. By the way, that's what it's called. But we see that Jesus was a human, right? And so he felt all of those emotions. We know from looking again at Scripture, we see Jesus wept. He cried. He was sad. He was mourned. He was angry. We see Jesus had this array of emotions just like all of us. And so I think Jesus felt love. Right? Jesus felt love. And so he eagerly desired to be with his disciples because he was embracing the love that they had for him too. And so for him to be there at that place with the people that he loved and who loved him, again, it's the last night before his death. He could have been doing all kinds of stuff, right? If you know, like the last hours of his life, he could have been out having a good time, partying, making the most of it. Who knows what he could have been doing. But for Jesus, making the most of it was to be there with the people that he loved and who loved him. And he felt that love. So embracing the love, as I said before, it can be in all kinds of ways. Yes, sure, it might be at like our wedding. Or it might just be sitting down, having a meal together, kind of connecting, kind of giving somebody a hug when they need it, right? There's ways where we can kind of allow ourselves to embrace the love that's happening, even in the small ways. But I think we have to remember that we can't have peace and love if we're fighting the love from others. So, as we go through this holiday season, all the craziness, all the stuff going on around us, for different people, different circumstances, may we find the peace and love through loving without condition and embracing the love of others. And perhaps part of that finding, part of that searching, is taking moments to just stop, reflect, consider, think about. In a moment, we're going to be partaking in communion together. And that could be a moment where we can do that. We can take a moment to stop, reflect on peace, love, and cookies. So when COVID started happening and we went all virtual as a church, and Linda was doing the first communion virtually, she told us, she said, hey, go grab something that you have at your house so you can participate in. You guys know where I'm going, right? Go grab something that you have at your house so you can participate in communion. Luckily, we had cookies at our house, which actually is rare because they don't last long in our house. So we did have cookies, and so I grabbed the cookie, and it was actually so beautiful because it was something that I love that was reminding me of the love without condition that Jesus has for me. I'll get through it. And how he eagerly desired for me to be at that table. It was a chance for me to allow myself to embrace that love and to experience the peace, even if it's for a moment in time, that is found in the love of Jesus. And so today, when we do communion, and we have communion, you notice there's a jar up here. If you would like, you're welcome to participate in communion by grabbing a cookie that's in the jar. It's in a little brown bag. You're welcome to if you like. And let it be a way of savoring this sweet cookie as part of your communion to remember the sweet love of Jesus. And may we all embrace the love of Jesus, and may that embrace free us to go out and love without condition, and may we find some peace in embracing the love of one another.